Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Joe Panettieri, industry influencer, global tech media entrepreneur, and the voice of Channel E2E and MSSP Alert.
Yeah, take that down, thanks. Hey folks, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and I hope I expressed it enough in one-on-one conversations and also some other sessions. Thank you so much for your readership and also sharing your stories about your business journeys with me. I really appreciate it. Without you, I have an empty blog, so thank you so much. I just wanted to set the table a little bit for this session. We're going to keep it interactive. We'll open it up to questions with you if you have questions in the room. But before we bring up our panelists, I wanted to paint a picture for you. I'm always very careful when people talk about the MSP to MSSP journey, because I think in many ways that sentence can be very misleading. And here's why I say that. When we launched MSSP Alert, there were a lot of vendors who said, oh, we have software products or technologies that can, out of the box, transform an MSP into an MSSP. And I frankly called BS. I'm like, that's a dangerous statement. We don't want to be putting that out in the market in terms of an overall managed services industry. What I prefer and how I think of the market is every service provider, whether you're an MSP or an MSSP, has to get into the cyber pool. Everyone. We all need to mitigate risk internally as well as for end customers. But the cyber pool, generally speaking, has a shallow end and a deep end. That deep end are for true MSSPs who are 24/7, purely cyber, and they go super deep. The shallow end, please don't think of that as some sort of insult or anything like that. The shallow end is massive and wide. It's these tens of thousands of small businesses that need your help to mitigate risk. And you need to be in the cyber pool to help that. The question is, in this big cyber pool, where are you going to play? Shallow end or deep end? Are you going to build, partner, or buy, et cetera? But that's sort of the thesis. So I don't want the thesis to be every MSP is going to become an MSSP, because personally, my personal belief is I don't believe that at all. That said, can we bring up some chairs as well as our awesome panelists to talk a little bit about their cyber journeys in their MSP and or MSSP practices? And can we also bring up, I think we have a panelist slide. If we do, please bring it up. If we don't have it, we'll do intros either way. Gentlemen, awesome to see you. Do we have chairs coming up?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know how we're doing.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thanks, Steph.
And I'm not a sitter, I'm a walker, so I'll move around a lot. My legs get antsy. And like I said, we'll definitely open us up to questions, but what I wanted to do before we open it up to questions is paint the picture for you, because each one of you has been on a slightly different, or in some cases, dramatically different journey. And that's A-okay. There's so many different ways to address the cyber pool. So why don't we start left to right, just maybe a minute or two about your role, your company, start with your name, your role, your company size in terms of headcount, and do you have a dedicated cyber practice, or are you pure MSSP, or are you just sort of, a little bit of everything? Let's get it open, and then we'll get some questions going.
All right. My name is Patrick Layton. I'm the Vice President of Managed IT for Impact Networking. We are 25 locations, about 850 employees, about 180 million in revenue. We started building our cyber practice as part of the MSP, and at a certain point in that journey, we decided to spin that off into a new business called Dot Security. We do have a booth in the trade show, so stop by and say hi. But we took that as a full separate business, and we really separate MSP from MSSP based on function and what we're providing to the customer.
Okay, and let me crystallize that. Patrick, how many employees again?
About 850.
About 850. How many employees dedicated to cyber?
About 60.
About 60. 850, 60, and that's a dedicated cyber business that's separate, right?
Separate cyber business.
Okay. Lock that in your head for your questions. Patrick, 850 employees, 60 dedicated to cyber, pure cyber practice. Got it? Got it. Next up.
All right, Ben Tercha, Vice President of Operations at Omega Systems. We're about 135 employees over 3 locations today and growing. We started our MSSP practice, and we started as an MSP and grew into the MSSP as the customer need arose. And that started about 8 years ago, and it started small, and it's been a very large vertical of our business for many different customer sizes. We're a little unique after talking with everyone else here, and I think we'll get into that a little bit more. That's it.
Got it. Okay. And let me just lock it in for the attendees. First and last name again, and how many employees?
Ben Tercha, 135 employees, about 12 dedicated to the MSSP side of the business.
Okay, awesome. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. Christian.
All right, Christian Kelly, CTO at Xantrion. We are size, we're about 90 to 95 people. We're a typical MSSP. We full stack services, moving up to mid-market as well. Cybersecurity focused, like full-time, that's all they do, is probably like 5 or 6, but the team that kind of mixes in and out, NOC, SOC services combined is probably closer to 11.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Thank you each. Now, I certainly have questions. I don't know if we have a microphone in the room for a runner or not. I apologize for not knowing that. If we do have a runner, great. If not, don't worry about it. The one thing I would ask is, if you do have a question, just raise your hand way up high, and I promise we will get to it. But I thought I saw a hand. If you do need my attention, just shout out Joe as well. Okay, in terms of questions here, let's talk about a little bit about. Let's start with large, really large, 900 employees and about 120, give or take, focused on cyber. Was it 120 focused on? 60, I'm sorry. See, I'm hearing answers out there. So 60 focused on cyber, but you spun it off as a separate business.
We did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? But not about the moment you spun it off, but the journey to that decision.
Yeah, I mean, we, on the MSP side, our practice is based on a paid assessment, and we provide one solution. So when we come back to the table with the client, they get a fixed monthly fee, and it's our full solution based on what we discovered during that assessment. And it included a lot of what we like to call security first tools, so managed firewall, EDR, security awareness training, and those are things that the customer can't take out of the deal. That's just how we do business, and as we continue to evolve with the security stack, it was more and more. We just started adding more things to the stack that you couldn't remove. And so we got to this point in that journey where we really had to define that the MSP was operations, and those are the guys that touch and do and provide the support. And then on the security side, they don't touch and do. If we're just the MSSP, we don't have your credentials. We're helping you deploy tool sets, and we're bringing that telemetry into the SOC, and we're providing that advisory service, but now we have to make a partnership with whoever the IT team is, because they're the ones that still have to carry out the actual actions based on whatever intelligence that we have. So when we separated, it helped in the marketplace, especially in sales, by being able to say it was a separate company and these are 2 separate teams, because there's a lot of different reasons why a customer might confuse those things, and having the SOC not combine puts you in that weird spot where you're the guy doing, but you're also the guy testing, and that might be a weird relationship. So that was the real impetus for spinning off that business.
Okay. And Ben, from your vantage point, I know you're roughly 100, 120 employees, give or take. As you went on this journey, you haven't spun out a separate business. It's not necessarily required at that scale of business. But did you build any sort of internal walls and dedicate a practice? How'd you do this?
Absolutely, yeah. So we started out as with anything, as the business comes, we grow the teams, and so we built a whole internal SOC team, right? So that it's under the same umbrella, but a separate department, separate management team that oversees the security practice from the support. We identified several years ago, there's a big difference between support and security, right? Just because you're supporting the customer doesn't mean you have to provide security under that offering. And we wanted to find a way to secure our customers, but also generate additional revenue, right? So we partnered with Fortinet to start that journey. Early on, our journey started with, we sold Cisco ASA firewalls, right? And everyone who's been in the industry a while, they did firewalling and they did VPN really well, but that's about it, right? So we set out to find a better product, and we talked to half a dozen different vendors and ended up partnering with Fortinet because of the the size, the breadth, and then the management platform that allowed us to launch our MSSP offering. So our base offering includes hardware as a service. It includes all the logging, monitoring, reporting, our SOC team reviewing the alerts, SIM if it's needed. We work with a lot of different regulated customers, so we'll add SIM if they need it. EDR, know before for cyber awareness and phishing, and the add-ons, what we put into that stack changes. It seems like every 6 months. We're changing what we're offering the customers.
Yeah, the solution set's always changing. So a two-part follow-up for you. First on NOC versus SOC, but also for the model and the solution set. When we started the panel, one of the things I mentioned is I sometimes think it's dangerous when people start talking about every MSP will become an MSSP. The other danger I've heard in the market sometimes is like, we'll transform your NOC into a SOC. Okay, I'd like to hear more about that, and if it's even smart to do. What I hear increasingly is, no, we have a NOC and we have a SOC, and it's two separate focuses. Is that the thesis attendees should listen to? I mean, what's your vantage point there?
No, they definitely need to be separate. Yeah, so the NOC technicians, at least for us, are a customer support side, but they're also responding to alerts and monitoring, calling Comcast when the circuit goes down and things like that. So the SOC team is dealing strictly with security-related events that aren't necessarily under the purview of the NOC team, right? There's a lot more power, there's a lot more responsibility, and there's a lot more responsiveness needed from a SOC perspective that may not exist on the NOC team.
Got it. Christian, similar for you or totally different? And Patrick, you may have a follow-up.
I said a point, yeah. I was going to say, you said every MSP will become an MSSP, and I don't know that that's true, but I do believe that if you're delivering MSP services, you have to either become an MSSP or have a good partner to do that, because the fact is you can't operate a network anymore without these tools and these solutions. It's impossible. That's what the threat looks like now.
Yeah, I think we're in firm agreement. Every MSP needs a cyber answer, absolutely. And that's either going to be in-house or it's going to be through a partnership, without a doubt. Patrick, in terms of, Christian, excuse me, in terms of sort of the thesis so far, I talked a little bit about separation of NOC and SOC. We talked a little bit about, did you set up a separate internal business unit, or are you thinking about spinning it out? What's your thought process so far on the journey?
Yeah, so we're, I think, very similar to most MSSPs, right? 5-6 years ago, it was all about managed services, and we kind of looked at the horizon and said, hey, we need to start bringing in new services and capabilities to our team and to our clients. And so when we kind of formed that service, we did create a SOC. And I do believe that you need talented, smart security professionals on your team. We have multiple CISSPs. It's a legitimate group that understands SOC services. We have taken a slightly different tact where we've worked really hard around automation and enrichment. We've invested in some platforms that allow us to take alerting in and do some of that initial analysis programmatically, right? So we might pull alerts out of the Graph API. We'll be able to enrich those alerts through other API calls to understand. And then our hope, and this is a journey, we haven't gotten there yet, is that those first kind of triaged alerts that come in have enough information where maybe someone who isn't as highly technical can put first eyes on it and make a determination, hey, is this something legitimate, or is this a P1, is this a P2, is it a P3? So our hope is that some of our NOC specialists can work their way through and be able to maybe frontline and triage some of those things without so much analyst work having to be done manually. So we're trying to automate, we're trying to understand, and maybe in time have some of that combined, where especially after hours when teams are thick, you might have kind of a NOC SOC / analyst kind of doing both sides. But in order to be legitimate, you do have to have a true SOC team and be able to at least take escalations and deal with incidents as they arise.
Yeah, fantastic.
I don't think you could do it without the automation at this point. There's so much data coming in and so many alerts. If you don't have that automation and some kind of help, it's impossible to get through, right? You'd just be throwing bodies at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about the automation? And one of the questions in terms of those incoming data feeds, there are ISOs for the healthcare market, for financial services, banking, et cetera. Do you find really great threat feeds specifically designed for MSPs and MSSPs these days in terms of that data you're taking in? or is it still a lot of legwork but before you even get to the enrichment?
I think there's still a ton of legwork. I think there's companies trying to do that, trying to take the high-level alerting coming out of the government organizations and doing something with it. Huntress is doing something like that. You get a lot of the same information from a lot of different sources. You still have to go do your digging, or it's not as valuable, right? They tip you off, but then you still have to go do the work.
Got it.
Ben, you were still a lot of manual investigation, right? When it comes to, is this legit? Is this a real threat before you have to act? We were just talking earlier today about, all right, do we just, instead of the investigation, do we just quarantine? Do we stop that attack right away and then, remediate? There's many different approaches, and, just depends on what the customer tolerance is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And Christian, from your vantage point, as you sort of massage and enrich this data, how do you find this talent to do that? I mean, a lot of MSPs are just struggling to get that first cyber pro on board. I mean, what's been your talent strategy?
I think, finding talent is difficult. I think that's true across the industry. I think we have a good culture in our company. I think we work hard to bring people up, right? We've had multiple members of our staff who've started at, service desk or, kind of levels who are now CISSPs.
Right.
Like within a 7-year time frame, right, moving up through the company, and then are able to either, be the ones out in front talking to clients about strategies, about, walking people through tabletops, or going through assessments, or kind of being on the more tactical side, understanding, alerting, that type of thing. I think, bringing people up through and showing people that they have a path and kind of supporting them through that path is important. But finding and retaining talent is a challenge, I think, industry-wide.
Got it. I have more questions on talent, but I also have questions on sort of how you package your services, how you brand the services, et cetera. But I also sometimes during panels like this, I get guilty of focusing on the panel and not turning to the audience. For that, I apologize. If you do have questions, pop a hand, just say JP question. I'm more than happy to make sure we get it to the right person. In terms of how you package your services, there's no one size fit all in terms of like every MSP is going to do this or every MSSP is going to do that. There's all different flavors on how to do this. What has been your approach in terms of, do you still have sort of that general purpose IT services package with some cyber in it and then a separate full-blown cyber package? Or is it, it's one bundle now, period, and our customer has to go with that? I'll throw it open to the entire panel. I want all your thoughts.
So I'll tell you, we do on the MSP side, it's that one package that we bring together, and you don't really have a say in what we're going to bring to you. It's one solution or no solution, and that has that security first stack in it. We now talk to those clients about the cyber piece and why 24/7 eyes on glass are important, and it's really not good practice to not have that, but the education to the C-suite and the budgets aren't there yet for me to pull the trigger and just say all the cyber stuff's automatically included. I think we're less than a year away. Maybe we're 18 months away from that being how we go to market. We'll see. The education piece and the budget piece are the two biggest ones. I don't want to miss out on the operational IT opportunity because I'm twice as expensive and I'm being compared to somebody that's not including the cyber piece, right? But I think we're getting there.
Yeah. Ben, from your vantage point?
Yeah, so we have actually several different products. So from a managed services perspective, so our traditional service desk, proactive support, patching, monitoring, that's under our smart support. So everything we do is smart whatever. So support is that piece there. We have smart host, smart store, and you can kind of guess what those are. And smart secure is a separate service offering. So a lot of our customers take 3, sometimes 4 different managed services from Omega. So we kind of, again, we make that delineation. Support is here, security is here, and security, we had a lot of customers just buying firewalls and saying, well, you can configure the firewall for it. You can tell me when something happens, right? Well, no, that's under secure. If you're looking for that, we have that. We can do that under secure. So that's been a real change for us. And when we started that shift, maybe about 6-7 years ago, customers just started to adopt it like crazy. When firewalls came up for a refresh, we include the firewall. The sales team, is still trying to, we're trying to get them out of selling the firewall mindset and sell the managed security, smart secure. But it's been very successful for us from a go-to-market strategy. To your point, not every customer will need it, right? We have a lot of financial services customers, banking, we have healthcare, insurance, they require it, right? But when you get to the smaller construction companies, they don't necessarily see the value in that. Some of them don't even have a cyber liability insurance. So just the conversation about MFA is a struggle sometimes, and we see all ends of the spectrum, and that's why we kind of like you, we didn't go to the path of forcing it down their throat. It's an option. We can do it. We want you to do it. You should have it, but it's not going to be a requirement to be a customer. Will we make that shift eventually? It's going to take some time, or maybe just in certain markets we'll do that.
Got it. And Christian, let me get your thoughts, but my follow-up will be what happens to your traditional managed services when the shift comes. But Christian, from your vantage point, how are you currently packaging things?
Yeah, so we have one package that we have. So we're kind of the traditional support, all you can eat support, as they say, and then the security services layer on. We moved all of our clients starting about 5 years ago to like 2 or 3 years ago. We were able to make that shift and bring all the clients which were on the old kind of non-security package across. There is one tweak where we do have kind of a slightly higher level of managed security for regulated clients that comes with more proactive reporting, vulnerability management programs, things like that. But at least all of our clients do have kind of the base, if you don't have MFA, EDR, all of the things that we kind of require security awareness training program, you're not a client of ours.
Okay, and then when you made that switch, I'm trying to remember, we were talking yesterday, I think you insisted on your clientele make the switch. Some customers didn't make the switch, right? You lost a few?
Yeah, we obviously it wasn't like a wave a magic wand and it was done. We got through all the clients who said yes easily, and then we got through the clients who said yes, kicking and screaming, and then there were a few at the end that didn't want to pull the trigger, and we had to part ways with them. Actually, one client who we asked over and over, like we wanted to secure them, we wanted them to do MFA, not have remote capability into the network without MFA, and as they transitioned to we said, well, you can't be a client of ours, and within days of transitioning to the new vendor who took them on, they got crypto lockered. Which was, obviously we wouldn't wish that on the client, but at that point, all of a sudden, MFA, EDR, it all came in, and it's like, hey, it would have been a lot cheaper for you to just say yes to this small price increase that we've been asking for you for a year, than to have to lean on insurance, pay a $25,000 deductible and like $200,000 in remediation and forensics. Like it was a real, we were thankful, obviously, that it wasn't 5 days before when it was still on our watch, right? That would have been
Dodged the bullet.
The worst outcome for everybody. But yes, so we did shed a few clients. But honestly, I think the way the insurance market is going and the way that the industry is going, people, clients understand that they do need these things. They understand that, at least the basics are now table stakes, so it's not that difficult of a conversation.
Yeah. Listen, I've been in our own research, I've been amazed by the uptake of EDR and just sort of these, I hesitate to call them next generation services now, because they're mainstream generation services now for those who are on the front lines here. So and it's great to see, and I see real risk mitigation happening throughout the industry and throughout the room, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Was that a question?
It is a question.
Awesome, and I'm sorry to keep you waiting. What's your question?
If you guys are comfortable, could you tell us exactly what you consider the minimum necessary security stuff? Like, is it EDR? Is it Threat Locker? Is it MFA? Like, that you would take on in a client, right? You mentioned a couple of things, but like, what is your minimum stack? You will take this or you will go somewhere else.
Sure.
I mean, for us on the MSP side, it's managed firewall, security awareness training, DNS protection at the endpoint, persistence at the endpoint, backup, cloud backup. So basically what we add when we add the security service is the SIM, vulnerability management, the CISO service, and the SOC monitoring. That's really what gets added when we move them to the .security program.
Yeah, for me, so if we're doing MSSP for a customer, it's our Smart Secure package. So even if you own a Fortinet firewall, if it's not under our Smart Secure package, we aren't providing those proactive services to it. That's kind of our line in the sand, if you will, of the difference between a customer who has a firewall or a customer or versus a customer we're doing all their security for, because we'll deploy from the edge all the way down to the endpoint and everything in between. So.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty similar. We authenticate, like the stack you're on and the authentication is really important to us. We plug a lot into understanding the authentication workflows. So they need to be on 365. They need to be single sign-on if at all possible through anything. MFA we do through 365 as well with conditional access. EDR, multiple agents on the endpoint, security awareness training, and then again, the higher level services are full-blown vulnerability management, logging, aggregation, SIM services, things like that. One thing that we do as part of our standard package that actually gets a lot of traction for us, or it adds a lot of value, I think, to our service and our clients is we, full-blown SIM and kind of complex stuff is definitely in the higher level package, the more regulatory package, but we do hook in at the Graph API level and pull in all the alerting that we possibly can at our normal managed security level, and you get a lot of good intel from there, right? The anomalous activity, the anomalous tokens, the unusual travel, and we process all of those through our SOC regardless, at that base layer, and we're able to catch a lot of oddities. Like Microsoft's pretty good when we talk about AI and all of that. Like it's unlikely that companies at our size, I mean maybe at your size, are like truly have developers on staff who are building like AI capable ML, AL type things, but Microsoft obviously at their scale and size is doing an amazing amount, and not watching those alerts and acting on them is a big miss. You can really put your clients at risk. So having some method and way to pull those in and act on them is, I think, if you're not doing that, is something that you should absolutely do.
Got it. Now, I have additional questions on how frequently you update, change, evaluate your stack, but I don't want to take time away from our attendees, so I'll come back to that if we do have time. We have a question towards the back and then a question up front here, if we could get a microphone, please, in a minute. But yes, sir, your question.
Yes, so I was curious about, you guys are talking about like a base package. Do you guys change those packages based on if they're like a full cloud, like Azure client, or if you're actually basing it purely on like nodes, endpoints? Like, or is it user count, or is it?
Go ahead. I can answer. We're on a per user. Our model is a per user play, so it doesn't matter if they're cloud or on-prem. We might take into a very complex internal environment into context when we price it, but it's per user, and we have many clients that are pure cloud now, so nothing on-prem. There is nothing to hook a SIM to. There is nothing to put a firewall on. I mean, they might have an office, but it's no difference than like a Starbucks. It's an internet, shared internet space is all it is. So yeah, we absolutely take both, and we charge per the user, and it doesn't really change much whether they're all cloud or not.
Yeah. So we're a little different where we have our Smart Secure product, and there's 3 different tiers inside Smart Secure from, we'll say low and all the way up to the regulated space, and then we size, or we price that tier based upon the number of devices in the network. So not so much per user based, but the size of the network, because what we've seen is, well, you have workstations, you have servers, you have network, you have IP phones, DVRs, and all that traffic has to flow through the firewall. You're looking at the logs for all of that traffic. So we size by the size of the environment, and then there's different tiers. And then when we get into like the end user products, such as EDR, what we call Cat Plus, for Know Before, that's all per user based. So to answer your question, it's a little bit of a combination of both. When we talk about on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, the model doesn't change. So if we go into a public cloud environment, we're putting a virtual firewall in that tenant, whether it's Azure or AWS. We've done both. We have a lot of customers where we do private cloud hosting, and we have the firewall stack in our data center. We carve them out a virtual firewall. That firewall gets tied into their reporting, into their ADOM in the world of Fortinet. Pull the logs off the servers into SIM, everything else like that. And on-prem is kind of the same as private cloud, if you will. So.
Yeah, we end up about the same too. Sales facing, it looks like per user, but we have a pretty complex way that we price it in the background. We could get to a per user price, and we will for all of our clients, but until I do my assessment, I can't tell you if you're going to be $100 a user or $500 a user, because it depends on your environment, Once I get there, then I'll set a per user price, and that's what it looks like for the next 5 years of that contract.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. We appreciate the question. Question up here, sir.
So once you are their partner for IT infrastructure and security, once you had a cyber incident, how do you make clear to the client the scope of the NOC, the scope service of the NOC from the SOC, Security Operations Center, and the C-search, or you do deliver the C-search, the client has the right to incident response team with you, or they need to provide something like that?
Yep. Great question.
I mean, for us, it's pretty simple. The NOC side is you're usually getting phone calls and they're asking for your help. And the SOC side is us saying, hey, we saw this and here's what's going on and here's what we've done. They do still get support calls on the SOC side, but not nearly as much. What was the second part about the?
So when an incident happens then, like, so I always bring it back to like the last mile. Like everyone's talking about MDR and EDR, and I always worry about the R, the response, right? And there's so many different things that can be going on in response. How much of that are you going to handle yourself? And then do you use a third party and make it clear to your customers that, hey, for that level of response, incident response, your contact is actually X, and it's going to be Y dollars per hour.
Yeah,
how do you handle this?
We do that all in-house. We don't outsource anything. Just with our size and scope, it allows us to sell the quality and operate at the level we want to operate at. But for incident response like that, if they have cyber insurance, a lot of times that insurance company is going to dictate who comes in and is like leading, especially because they want to do the forensics and they want to put a hold on hard drives and things like that. So even though we're doing the cleanup or the incident response, we're a lot of times taking direction from whoever the player is coming in from the insurance company. If they don't have cyber insurance, then we're doing the cleanup ourselves. And that happens on the MSP side with the MSSP dictating what happens, but the operation side is actually doing the work.
You do, but you bill them hourly.
It's built into their program. We do fixed monthly fees, so it's built into the program.
Yes. So for us, kind of that delineation, we'll call it, of in-house versus, I wouldn't say outsource, but refer to cyber insurance. We follow the same thing. If it's an isolated incident, it's small event. But if we're looking at a ransomware attack across the entire environment, where more than likely there's going to be some type of data breach, a need to notify, we'll be engaged to hand off to the cyber insurer. And usually our directive is our team will start the investigation. At the same time, we'll tell the customer, call your attorney, call your cyber insurer right now, right? Get them on the phone, let's get a call going. We can tell you what we've seen, and because, to your point, usually the cyber insurer will say, all right, we got it from here, we're taking over. Or they'll say, go ahead, you run with it, and we'll do the full incident response, stop the attack, determine what happened, write the report, remediate if possible. Your follow-up question about billable or not. So if you're an MSSP customer, that incident response is built into our practice. If you're just an MSP customer and you call us and say, I have an incident, we will handle it, but that is billable outside the agreement.
Yeah, and very similar. All of our clients are fully managed, so we would obviously jump in and start the incident response, but 9 times out of 10, an incident response team is going to be dictated by insurance, and we'll work closely with them, getting them the access they need, the logs they need, what have you. And then obviously for any kind of remediation or cleanup, that's stuff that we'll do, and again is built into the managed services. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for a great question. Yes, sir, right there towards the left middle back of the room.
Yeah, I've got 2. First one's a quick one. Who handles the deployment of your security tools? Is that handled within the MSSP side, or somewhere else in the professional services or the MSP side, just the deployment of the tools? And then secondly, how are you showing value throughout times where maybe there aren't incidents or alerts to process? Like what reports, what metrics, what things are you showing value to your customers?
Let's start.
So for us, if it's just MSSP and we're working like with an internal IT staff or a third-party MSP that the customer likes, we'll have a meeting and say, what do you have to deploy the software? Here's all the stuff we're going to include. Are you using group policy? Do you have an RMM tool? We'll help them build those packages. But it's on the IT operations team to do that deployment. If it's both services, then my operations team's the one doing that deployment. What was the
How do you show value?
I mean, PBRs, right? You got to meet with your clients and show them what the tools are doing. I'd much rather show them what's happening in the service. We have a CISO that's attached to every account. That's kind of like the account manager. Hopefully he's bringing value about their industry, what's happening in the industry in terms of cyber, the steps we've made, because it is a 5-year program and it's a journey. So we start out with, we're going to deploy these tools. And once we do that, your security posture is a little bit better. It's not great, but it's better. But what's next, right? So it's aligning to NIST, aligning to CIS controls, building out your response plan, making sure you're doing tabletops. So we're walking them through this roadmap, and their security posture should be increasing. Every quarter we meet, we should be able to show them some value that we added over that time period, that their posture has gone up, right? And you're ultimately chasing that every employee and every client that you have has a security mindset, because that's really where you start to see the change, when the workers start to understand why it's important. And yeah, it's a pain in the ass that you got to take out your phone and re-authenticate every 12 minutes or whatever it is now, right? Security, convenience, and balancing that. But if you get people thinking that way and the end users are thinking that way, I think you're off to the races then. That's when you've really made an effect.
So for us, from a deployment perspective, we have a project team that does the entire deployment. So if it's, tool sets on the workstations, SIM, whatever, that it could be handled by project, maybe handled by SOC, just depends upon, how quickly it needs to be deployed, engineer availability. When we're talking on anything that's done on-prem, it's handled by our project team. They do the initial deployment, initial config, then they hand it over to our SOC team for, we'll say, standardization against our practices. When it comes to showing value, that's one thing that, you use the Visa, so we have a technical account managers that are looped in, but based upon the level of smart secure, we have different cadences, basically pre-planned with the customer. If it's, the lowest end tier, it's usually every 6 months. To the highest end tier, they're hearing us at least weekly, but sometimes daily on different things that are happening. And the weekly is, we're reviewing their reports and saying, well, did you know this user was connected to the VPN for 8 hours and pulled 10 gigs of data? Last week, they weren't connected that long and they pulled less, information like that. We used to make bets with customers, which was always fun, is what was your top used application? Oh, it's gonna be Salesforce, right? And we do that first report review, and it's Netflix, YouTube, right? So when it comes to the security posture showing value, is we're providing that information to the customer, but also along with the recommendations is, did you know this was happening inside your environment? Here's our suggestion on what you should do in this case. Ultimately, that's up to the customer, right, to make that decision to have us implement it. We will implement it then if they give us the go-ahead, but we aren't just going to go in and start changing, web filtering, UTM policies just because we think it's the right thing to do. There is a baseline, but when it comes to acceptable use, that's really driven by the customer. And that just comes from interactions and discussions and guidance.
Christian, from your vantage point, any tips on how to show value?
I think, having those, monthly or quarterly contact with the client and really, driving and, helping them understand the value of what you're delivering. One of the things, kind of going to his question, not repeating, because, I think we're pretty much in alignment with what everyone is doing, is one way that we see the kind of the NOC and the SOC working pretty hand in hand around security is inventory understanding and management. One of the problems that we have in our industry is we throw out our RMM tool and then we use that as kind of the metric to say, okay, is my security tools installed? Well, yes, because my RMM tool says so, but is the RMM tool truly on every device?
Right.
Is every agent that you care about in your program on every device, and can you prove it to the client? That's something that it's hard to do because we all use different products, and trying to tie those all together is difficult. So we spent a lot of time internally developing kind of an API play where we bring all those data sources together and we line them up. So when we go to a client, we can say, we see all your devices are indeed in all of the systems that they should be in. And oh, by the way, there's these 5 devices that have appeared, and what are these? Like, they're not in Active Directory, they're not in Azure, they're not, they're just showing up in one data source, right? So if we can pull and understand something from one data source, then we can understand if there's a gap, or maybe those are home systems that have somehow leaked their way into the environment or what have you. But that, so we'll utilize all of our teams together to arm the VCIO with data and valuable input to give to the client on those quarterly or monthly cadence calls.
Got it. Other questions? And I'm sorry if I didn't see a hand. Just shout out if I missed anything. So tool sprawl and sort of managing the evaluation of what to add to your stack and managing the evaluation of what to turn off in your stack. Do you have a point person on that? And sort of how do you manage that process overall in terms of assuring you're choosing the right things? How long does it take? And how do you make sure that you're not getting into a sprawl problem? Anyone want to take a first crack at that?
I mean, I think it's constant, one, because the salespeople just call you every day and you eventually end up talking to them, right? But we get it a lot from our team using the tools. So we've already changed out several of our tools on the security side because I think it's an immature business still and there's a lot of new stuff being developed. They're not getting what they need out of it, right? And they'll tell you that they're not getting what they need out of it. So
Your team will.
Our team, yeah, especially at the analyst level.
Yeah.
We're a Perch partner, and when they got acquired, ConnectWise scaled on the sales side really, really fast, but maybe not so well on the actual Perch appliance side. And I'd have an analyst like just grab me and say, "Here, you watch." As it's like, I can't do my job. What are you going to do about this, right? So we went and yelled and got some answers, and also started looking at other SIM platforms, and now we're doing Sentinel as well. So that drove that. That change drove that.
Yeah. For us, it's, yes, you get the inbound, marketing, phone calls, emails, LinkedIn, right? Which is good. Events like this really kind of, I think, give you a lot of exposure to the different tool sets that are out there. We've changed, I would say, pretty much everything in our stack. Right, when we look at this, we had used one platform for internal vulnerability management to start. That got us to a certain point, and then we changed the tool set. So as you scale, your tools have to change. We've just accepted this, that just because we use one tool set, to get going, 8 years down the road, we've built a more mature cyber practice, and therefore requires better tools. Listening from our team is very important, as well as listening to customers. What do they need, right? Or what are they expecting us to provide? We aren't experts, right? We just can't go and create a product and sell it to them if they don't need it. So listening to the customers is one of our core key values of when we come to developing a service and bringing a service to offering is what are we going to achieve with this? How are we going to help our customers?
That's the key. You're selling a service. Yeah. You're using the tools to deliver that service, right? So we don't talk about name brands unless there's a value in talking about the brand. We talk about what it does, right? And then if I swap it out, you don't care.
Yeah, we're the same way. We've swapped out, not all our tools, but a number of our tools. And again, it's nice to not have to go back to the client and say, oh, this line item that you saw that was this dollar amount is now this new line. Like, it's built into the service. We get to decide, within reason, as long as the service level doesn't change. But yes, you get to, there's so many products out there. You should have someone in your company that is watching. Obviously, vendor due diligence is important, understanding, every tool that you add into your arsenal, into your stack, that you give access to your systems is increasing your risk footprint, right? And especially, understanding the vendors, what type of access they truly have in through the system. So you want to be careful. I know there's a lot of cool tools that do that one thing, and it's like, oh, but do we, the risk for that one thing, it's good to have, bringing a tool set in for us is a big discussion point. We don't just bring them in. We evaluate them, I'm sure everyone does, right? You really put them through their paces, and sometimes you don't get to bring the tool you want in because it might not be mature enough to bring into your stack.
Yeah, there's some that we've had to turn away because they didn't have a SOC 2 or they had a level of access to these platforms we just weren't comfortable with.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway is, I remember in the early days of when we were building out MSP Mentor, the tip we always shared was listen to your service desk. Your service desk, those pros will tell you where the business needs to go. And now you're saying in the cyber world, listen to your SOC analyst. They've got eyes on screen. They'll tell you where they need to go to do a great job for the customer. Is that a fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I'm really impressed with your journey so far. Can you tell us a little bit about 2023, key priorities, how you may evolve, sort of next steps, and maybe there may have been a misstep where you don't want to do that again in 2023. But Christian, let's start with you this time. Where are you looking ahead in 2023, and where you want to take your cyber journey?
Yeah, so we want to double down on this automation. We built a really good framework and capability internally. And we want to be focused on, where to develop that brings us kind of that unique value. There's a lot of products out there. We don't want to be building when there's a good product.
Right.
Right. We want to be developing, into the areas that are going to help us succeed and help us differentiate. From a tool side, that's one thing. The other thing is obviously, I think like a lot of MSPs our size, trying to continue to move up, move mid-market and higher. So, again, defining those kind of key services that are going to move well in the mid-market and continue to move us up.
Okay. Ben, from your vantage point?
Yeah, so for this year, and then the next year, we're looking at, enhancing the tool sets we have inside our Smart Secure offering. But when we looked at this again 6-8 years ago, the MSP, MSSP, support, secure, they started to kind of go different ways for us. The same thing is happening for us from a compliance perspective. So 2023, we just launched the new managed compliance offering, which again, we see that as different from security. So when we talk about compliance, it's data discovery, where's the data at, who has access to it, what are the risks associated to those systems, right? That's not necessarily a core, it's part of MSSP, but it's not part of our Smart Secure offering. So we've launched a new managed service strictly around compliance and governance. So when we talk, different framework assessments, NIST, data discovery is part of it, and then vCISO services. So that's where we're headed.
Patrick, where are you going?
Yeah, compliance is big for us too. We're rebranding that into privacy as a service, really focused on identity management. We think there's a lot of opportunity there. And we're actually taking a step into the channel side. We've been on this side for a long time. We believe with the .security service that we can help a lot of the smaller MSPs that just don't have the $20 million it takes to go build it all from scratch like we started doing 8 years ago. So yeah, I think the channel play and the compliance play are our big focuses next year.
Fantastic. We'll tell you what, we're right on time. How about a hand for Christian, Ben, and Patrick? And thank you guys again. I'm around at the show if anyone needs anyone from me. I really appreciate your time. Have a great lunch and a great rest of show.
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you so much.